My name is Emily. I'm 29 years old, and I thought I understood what betrayal felt like, until the day I sat in that lawyer's office and had my entire existence erased in a matter of sentences. The air in the room was heavy, my palms slick with sweat as I gripped the armrests of a chair, trying to ground myself. Across from me, my stepbrother Daniel lounged with an infuriating confidence, his smirk almost daring me to guess what was coming. I kept telling myself I had nothing to fear. After all, I had been the one who stayed by my parents' side when times were hard. I had worked double shifts to help with bills, missed vacations, skipped out on my own dreams just to make sure this family was okay. Surely they would remember that. Surely they would remember me. But then the lawyer's voice cut through the silence like a blade. All assets, including the family home, savings, and investments, are hereby left to our beloved son, Daniel. My ears rang. My heart slammed against my ribs. I waited for my name, but it never came. Page after page, clause after clause, and not a single mention of me. Not a word, not a dollar, not even a piece of jewelry. Nothing. I sat frozen, trying to breathe, while Daniel leaned back with that smug look of victory, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. The lawyer's words blurred into meaningless noise, because all I could hear was the deafening silence of my parents' choice. It wasn't just about money, it was about love, acknowledgement, worth. And in that moment, my world cracked open under the weight of one unbearable truth. How could my own parents erase me so easily? I grew up learning very early what it meant to be invisible in my own home, though at first I didn't have the words for it. My earliest memories were of trying to win my parents' approval, drawing pictures, bringing home good grades, doing everything I could to make them proud. But the day my stepbrother Daniel entered our family, everything shifted. I was 8 when my father remarried, and suddenly Daniel, just a year older than me, became the shining star of the household. Where my accomplishments were brushed aside with a polite nod, his were celebrated like grand victories. If he scored a goal at soccer, there were cheers and parties. But if I won a spelling bee, it was barely mentioned at dinner. I remember once saving up my allowance to buy my mom a birthday gift, a simple necklace I thought she'd love, and she smiled politely but later told me, "You didn't need to waste your money," while the expensive video game Daniel got her from Dad's wallet earned her gushing gratitude. Slowly, I learned that no matter what I did, it would never be enough, not compared to him. As I grew older, I threw myself into responsibility, because if love and praise weren't available, maybe usefulness would keep me needed. By the time I was 16, I was working part-time jobs after school, handing most of my paychecks to my parents to help with bills. College came, but instead of choosing a school out of state like I dreamed, I stayed close to home, commuting to classes so I could still contribute at home and babysit when needed. Daniel, meanwhile, was sent off to an expensive private university, fully funded by our parents, despite the fact that he often skipped classes and spent money carelessly. When my dad lost his job, I picked up more shifts, shelving my own plans to study abroad, and I told myself that family sacrifice mattered more than chasing personal dreams. Even when I wanted to move into my own apartment, Mom reminded me how much they needed my help at home, so I stayed. Years blurred into a cycle of working, giving, and waiting for some recognition that never came. Whenever Daniel needed money, my parents found a way, sometimes through me, sometimes by dipping into savings I thought were for both of us, but when I struggled, I was told to be grateful for what you have. It wasn't just favoritism. It was erasure, a slow rewriting of family roles where Daniel was the chosen son and I was the caretaker, the backup, the one expected to sacrifice quietly. And still, I clung to the hope that one day they would see me, that my loyalty would mean something. That's why, sitting in that lawyer's office, the shock was so devastating. Not because I didn't expect Daniel to get something, but because after decades of giving, of bleeding myself dry for them, I realized they had never planned to give me anything at all. My entire life had been built on the illusion that my parents valued me, and in that office it shattered. When we left the lawyer's office, my chest was so tight I could barely breathe, but I told myself I had to confront my parents immediately, that surely there had been some misunderstanding, some technical error, anything other than deliberate betrayal. That night, I sat across from them at the kitchen table, my hands trembling as I asked, "How could you leave me nothing? After everything I've done, how could you just erase me?" My father didn't even look up from his coffee. He just sighed and said, "Don't be dramatic. You're making this about money when it's really about family stability. Daniel is the heir. It makes sense." My mother chimed in with that same sharp, dismissive tone she always used when I dared to challenge her, saying, "You're being selfish. Daniel will carry the family name forward, and you'll be fine on your own. You've always been resourceful. Isn't that what you pride yourself on?" Her words stung because they weren't meant to reassure me. They were meant to belittle me, to paint me as ungrateful for not applauding their decision. I wanted to scream that I wasn't fine, that I had sacrificed my career opportunities to stay close when they needed help, that I had poured my savings into paying off medical bills and fixing up the house when Daniel disappeared for months without so much as a phone call. But when I tried, my father cut me off with a wave of his hand and muttered, "You sound bitter. That's not a good look. Bitter." I was drowning in grief, not greed, and they couldn't even see it. Within days, the gossip started spreading through the family like wildfire. An aunt pulled me aside at a gathering and whispered, "You can't fight this, dear. Daniel is the rightful heir. You're just stirring up trouble." Another cousin posted something vague on Facebook about jealous siblings who can't accept tradition, and though no names were mentioned, everyone knew who they were talking about. I stopped opening social media altogether because each comment felt like another knife twisting into my chest. I'd scroll through endless pictures of Daniel celebrating with relatives, dinners, toasts, champagne, while my phone stayed silent, no invitations for me, no words of comfort. It was as if my entire family had decided I was the villain, the ungrateful daughter, the troublemaker who dared question the sanctity of the will. The isolation was unbearable. Some nights I'd curl up on the bathroom floor, sobbing quietly, so no one would hear, the towels cold against my face as I whispered to myself that maybe they were right, maybe I really didn't deserve anything, maybe I was worthless after all. But just when I felt like I was slipping into a darkness I couldn't escape, a small light broke through in the form of the few people outside my family who truly cared. A coworker noticed I wasn't eating lunch and gently pushed me to open up, and when I finally told her, she didn't laugh or minimize it. She just hugged me and said, "Casey, this isn't about you not being enough. This is about them being blind." Another friend invited me over for dinner with her family, and as I watched her parents dote on her, fuss over her, include her in every decision, I realized with a painful clarity that I wasn't broken. I was just starved for the kind of love that should have been mine all along. Their support didn't erase the betrayal, but it reminded me that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't selfish, that I wasn't the villain my family painted me to be. And yet, the more I leaned on those outside connections, the more vicious the gossip became within my family, as though they sensed I was slipping from their control and wanted to pull me back down. Every text from my mother was sharper, every comment from my father colder, and Daniel seemed to thrive on it all, showing up at family functions with smug smiles and new stories about his inheritance, almost daring me to challenge him again. I felt trapped between their cruelty and my own longing for justice, and the tension kept building, higher and higher, until I knew something had to break. The breaking point came slowly, like water filling a glass drop by drop until it finally spilled over, and every interaction with my family felt like one more drop I couldn't contain. Daniel, my stepbrother, seemed to revel in the spectacle, showing off every purchase he made with what was now technically his money, calling it an investment in the family legacy, as though those words excused his arrogance. He bought a new car and made a point to park it in front of my apartment when he came to check on me, his smirk saying more than his words ever could. He bragged at dinners I was excluded from, but later saw posted online how the house would finally be renovated now that it was in capable hands, how our parents could finally relax knowing their true heir was carrying the torch. Each word, each smirk, each photograph carved a little deeper into the wound I was trying desperately to bandage. When I tried confronting my parents again, my mother clutched her pearls and accused me of causing stress, warning that if I kept attacking Daniel, I would ruin whatever slim chance I had of being included in family gatherings. My father barely looked at me, muttering that I needed to learn humility. Humility! As if being erased wasn't already the deepest humiliation a daughter could endure. The whispers from extended family grew crueler, with cousins muttering that I had always been too independent, that I should be grateful Daniel was willing to watch out for me. Watch out for me! He was the very one who stripped me of everything, and yet I was painted as the selfish one for even daring to grieve. At night, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was losing my grip on reality, if maybe they were right and I was ungrateful, if maybe the years I spent paying their bills, giving up vacations, shelving my dreams so I could stay close when they needed me, if all of that really meant nothing because I wasn't the child they wanted. The loneliness was crushing. I'd wake up with swollen eyes, drag myself to work, and paste on a smile so no one could see the storm inside me. My few supportive friends tried to convince me I deserved better. Even their words couldn't drown out my mother's voice echoing in my head. You'll be fine on your own. The more I heard it, the more it felt like a curse rather than comfort. Daniel, meanwhile, had perfected the art of flaunting his inheritance like a trophy. He started throwing parties at the family home, inviting relatives, neighbors, even old friends, while I wasn't given so much as a text. I saw the photos online, balloons, champagne, our childhood living room transformed into a stage, and each one felt like salt rubbed into raw flesh. Once, I drove past the house just to see if it was real, and through the window I saw my parents laughing beside him, glasses raised, their faces lit with pride I had never been able to draw out of them. I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, tears streaming down my face as I whispered to myself, was I ever really their daughter, or just a placeholder until Daniel came along? The question haunted me, gnawed at me, and no matter how much I tried to push forward, their betrayal dragged me back like chains I couldn't break. The tension reached a peak one evening when I came home to find a letter slipped under my door, an invitation, but not for me. It was a family notice about a celebration of legacy hosted by Daniel, addressed to relatives, but mistakenly delivered to me by a neighbor. The words were like knives. We're proud to announce the continuation of the family line through Daniel, who has inherited not just our estate, but our trust, our love, and our hopes for the future. My name wasn't mentioned once. It was as though I had never existed, as though my years of sacrifice had been erased with a single flourish of a pen. I sank to the floor holding that letter, my chest heaving with sobs so violent I thought they would never stop. And yet, deep inside, a small ember burned, an ember of rage, of clarity, of something sharper than grief. I realized that if I kept letting them write me out of a story, they would succeed. I had a choice, to collapse under the weight of their betrayal, or to stand, even on shaking legs, and reclaim the part of me they had tried to bury. I didn't know how, not yet, but I knew the breaking point had arrived, and the explosion was inevitable. The night of Daniel's celebration of legacy finally came, and though I hadn't been invited, the gnawing in my chest told me I couldn't stay away. I had to see with my own eyes the family that had erased me, the house that had once been mine in memory if not in paper, now lit up with golden lights and filled with laughter that felt foreign. My heart pounded as I stood outside, hearing music and voices filter through the walls, until something in me snapped. I walked straight through the door, heads turning as if a ghost had just entered. Conversations hushed, glasses paused midair, and then I saw him, Daniel, standing by the fireplace in a tailored suit, basking in the applause of relatives who praised his leadership and dedication. My parents flanked him like royal guards, pride etched on their faces, and for a moment I could hardly breathe because it was so clear I had been replaced, not just in the will but in their hearts. I stepped forward, my voice cutting the silence sharper than glass. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I'd stay silent while you erased me? My mother gasped, my father stiffened, and Daniel's smirk spread like poison across his face. This isn't the time, Casey, my mother hissed, trying to usher me aside, but I shook off her hand. No, this is exactly the time. I held up the letter I'd found under my door, my voice trembling but loud. You told the world Daniel inherited not just your estate but your trust, your love, your hopes for the future. Did it ever occur to you that I existed? That I gave up years of my life for you? My father finally spoke, his tone cold, measured, as if he'd rehearsed it. You're making a scene. We made our decision for the family's best interest. Daniel will carry the name forward. You've always been independent, Casey. You don't need us. The words hit harder than any slap, and whispers rippled through the room. I turned to my mother, desperate for something, anything, but her eyes darted away until finally she whispered, We thought he deserved it more. You've always been strong, but Daniel needed this. My knees nearly buckled. Deserved it more. Needed it more. As if my sacrifices, my sleepless nights bailing them out of debts, my countless hours keeping this family afloat were invisible, as if strength were punishment and love a reward reserved only for weakness wrapped in charm. So because I held you together, I don't get to exist? I choked out, my voice breaking but clear enough for the entire room to hear. Daniel chuckled, raising his glass. Face it, Casey, you were never the heir. You're just the helper. Gasps filled the room, and something inside me shattered but also ignited. The tears I had been holding back dried into something fiercer than grief. I stood taller, my voice steadier than it had ever been. You're right, Daniel, I said, locking eyes with him. I'm not the heir. I'm not the helper. I'm not anything you get to define anymore. I'm done begging for a place at a table that was never set for me. My mother reached for me, panic flickering in her eyes, but I stepped back, shaking my head. You didn't just disinherit me in paper. You disinherited me in spirit years ago, every time you dismissed me, every time you praised him while I was breaking my back to keep you afloat. Tonight just made it official. So congratulations, you got the son you wanted, and you lost the daughter you never deserved. Silence swallowed the room, no one daring to move, the truth hanging heavy in the air. For the first time, I didn't feel small or erased. I felt powerful, like reclaiming my voice had written me back into existence. Daniel's smirk faltered, my father's face drained of color, and my mother whispered my name like a prayer, but I didn't stay to hear the end. I turned, walked out into the night air, and as the door shut behind me, the weight of their betrayal lifted, not gone, but transformed into something stronger than pain, resolve. When I walked away from that house, it felt like the ground beneath me shifted forever, like the very earth that had held me captive in silence, and duty was finally loosening its grip. The night air was cold, sharp against my skin, but instead of shivering, I breathed it in like medicine, each inhale cleansing me of the poison I had carried for so long. At first, the loneliness was unbearable. After all, for years my entire life had revolved around trying to earn scraps of affection from people who only saw me as a placeholder. Now that I had cut the cord, the silence of my apartment screamed at me, whispering doubts into every corner. What if they were right? What if I was nothing without them? But therapy became the lighthouse in that darkness. Week by week, I began to speak aloud the truths I had buried, that I had been treated as second class, that my sacrifices had been demanded but never honored, that love in my home was conditional and cruel. Saying it out loud hurt, but it also cracked something open inside me. For the first time, I was grieving, Not just the inheritance stolen from me, but the parents I never really had. Slowly, I began piecing myself together in ways I never thought possible. I threw myself into work, not as an escape, but as a reclamation, using the same relentless energy I had once poured into supporting my family to finally build something for myself. The reward wasn't just financial, it was pride, self-respect, the knowledge that I could stand on my own. I reconnected with old friends, people I had drifted from because I was always too busy being the dutiful daughter, and to my surprise, they welcomed me back with open arms. We laughed, we traveled, we made memories that reminded me life was bigger than one toxic family. I even dared to open my heart to love, not desperate, not hidden, but real and mutual, with someone who didn't see me as a stepping stone but as an equal. And while my world expanded, the one I left behind began to shrink. Whispers trickled back. My stepbrother Daniel, the so-called golden heir, was drowning under the very responsibilities he had once smirked about inheriting. The debts I had once quietly paid to protect the family name now piled at his door, and the charm he used to coast on was no longer enough to shield him. Relatives who once praised him began to question his choices, and the pedestal he had been given began to wobble. My parents, older now, tried to lean on him the way they had leaned on me, only to discover that entitlement had never prepared him for sacrifice. I didn't celebrate his downfall. I didn't need to. Karma doesn't need applause. What mattered to me was the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had broken free before I could be dragged under with them. I realized that walking away hadn't destroyed me, it had rebuilt me. My worth had never been tied to their approval, their inheritance, or their cold recognition. My worth was in my resilience, in my ability to choose myself after years of being erased. I no longer asked why my parents had chosen him over me, because I finally understood the answer didn't matter. Their blindness, their betrayal, that was their burden to carry, not mine. Mine was the freedom I had carved out of the ashes, the home I had built defined not by blood, but by love freely given and freely returned. And as I stood in that freedom, I knew this was my inheritance. Not land, not money, but peace, dignity, and the unshakable truth that I was never the forgotten one. I was the one who survived, and then I was the one who lived. If there is one truth my journey carved into me, it is this. Family is not defined by blood, by last names, or by legal papers sealed in some lawyer's office. It is defined by the people who respect you, who honor your dreams, who do not make you beg for the bare minimum of love. I spent years believing my value depended on how much I could sacrifice, on how small I could make myself to fit into a space my parents had reserved for someone else. But worth is not given by others. It is claimed, it is lived. It is something no one can strip away unless you hand it to them. Betrayal taught me that even the people you expect to protect you can wound you the deepest, but it also taught me that freedom blooms when you finally stop asking them to change. True family can be found in friends who cheer your victories, in partners who hold your hand without conditions, in mentors who see your light even when you feel invisible. And the greatest family of all can be found within yourself, in the voice that whispers you are enough, even when the world tells you otherwise. Do not measure your worth against the coldness of others. Measure it by the courage it takes to walk away, to heal, and to build a life that reflects your truth. Because at the end of the day, inheritance fades, property crumbles, but self-respect endures. And once you choose to stand in your own value, you will realize you were never empty-handed. You were always carrying the greatest inheritance of all, your strength, your dignity, and your freedom. What would you do if you sat in a lawyer's office and discovered that your own parents had erased you from their legacy, leaving you with nothing while your stepbrother took it all? Would you stay silent and swallow the betrayal, or would you stand up and reclaim your worth, even if it meant walking away from the people who should have protected you? My story is just one example of how favoritism and toxic family dynamics can shatter someone's trust, but I know I'm not alone. Too many of us have felt the sting of being overlooked, of being told, whether in words or actions, that we don't matter as much as someone else. And yet, these painful moments are also where we find our true strength. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been cut out, overlooked, or betrayed by the very people who should have stood by you? Share your story in the comments. I promise someone out there needs to hear it. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so more voices can rise above silence.